The Hall of Resonance, nestled within the orbiting citadel of Vailter, was not a place where tempers usually flared. It was a monument to diplomacy and interstellar order. Dozens of species were represented in that grand, circular chamber, their appointed delegates seated in floating platforms that rose and shifted with the speaker's voice. Every movement was designed for calm, for reason, for quiet debate. But not today. This is not an act of war, Ambassador Hrel of the Catharn said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. It is a necessary correction. Earth has become unmanageable. A ripple passed through the other platforms, some in agreement, others in concern. On the holographic screen behind Hrel, images of human-made satellites, space stations, and planetary broadcasts played on a loop. They showed Earth's cities buzzing with energy, its people launching cargo into space, and its digital networks pulsing with constant chatter and content, some of it humorous, some of it baffling to anyone not human. They interfere with council operations, Hrel continued. They breach trade regulations, violate border agreements, and most dangerously refuse to align with our diplomatic norms. How long will we allow this? Ambassador Talion of the Asari, a species known for their long memories and careful speech, tilted his feathered head. They are disruptive, Talion said, but not malicious. They are still young. Exactly, Hrel countered. A youth without boundaries becomes chaos. I propose a controlled occupation of Earth's surface, minimal force, surgical in nature. We take control, establish guidance, and bring them into the fold. A low murmur filled the chamber as delegates exchanged views through their internal links. Some were in favor of its independence, had always been a source of friction. Others remembered past attempts at containment and how poorly those had ended. Ambassador Lorik of the Trelawney Union raised a translucent hand. We tried this during the Orion Corridor incident, Lorik said calmly. One human ship disabled 3 of ours using nothing but misdirection, improvised weapons, and deceptive diplomacy. We called it luck, then they did it again and again. They may be unorthodox, but they are resilient. A flicker of amusement passed over Hrel's expression. So we are to fear them for being unpredictable. We are to respect the unknown, Lorik said. The council chair, a being of light and motion known only as the Arbiter, hovered above the chamber's center. Its voice, always layered with harmony, addressed the floor. The motion to approve limited intervention on Earth is now open for vote. Delegates signaled their choices. Floating lights flickered across the chamber, green for approval, red for denial, yellow for abstention. The colors shimmered briefly, then locked into place. The final tally projected itself above the Arbiter. Motion passed. 41-17. Some platforms dimmed in disapproval. Others buzzed in quiet satisfaction. The Catharn delegation stood taller. It is done, Hrel said. But not everyone was celebrating. Ambassador Vetra of the Norelli Confederation, one of the elder races, leaned toward her aide and whispered, I visited Earth once. I met a human child who turned a broken telescope into a radio. They are not to be taken lightly. Her aide looked confused. They don't have faster-than-light capabilities. Their militaries are outdated. They are barely. That's the mistake, Vetra said quietly. We keep judging them by what they don't have. Above them, the council. Broadcast turned to the public feed. Across the galaxy, worlds watched with curiosity, amusement, or unease. On Earth, they hadn't heard the vote yet. But they would, and when they did, the response wouldn't be silence. It would be something very, very human. 3 days after the council's vote, the Catharn fleet entered Earth's orbit. Dozens of sleek cruisers emerged from folded space portals above the atmosphere, their hulls gleaming in Earth's sunlight. Around the planet, governments scrambled to decode transmissions, identify fleet formations, and estimate intentions. Earth had dealt with first contact before indirect probes, mysterious satellites, even a few diplomatic incidents, but this was different. This was loud, visible, coordinated. The Catharn's flagship, Vornikar, activated its global broadcast channel. A tall, silver-skinned figure appeared on every major screen, monitor, and network device. Even mobile phones in people's pockets suddenly buzzed with the transmission. I am Commander Rizzorai of the Catharn Ascendancy. Earth is now under protective council stewardship. Surrender is expected. Compliance will ensure peace. For a full minute, there was silence. Then came Earth's reply, not from a military general, or a president, or a carefully rehearsed global message, Instead, a video began streaming on every device that had just received the K-Thorn announcement. A woman in her mid-50s sat in a cluttered kitchen, wearing a faded hoodie and sipping from a mug that read one more word, and I'm getting the wooden spoon. Her expression was unimpressed. "Hi there," she said calmly. "Just caught your little broadcast. Real shiny ships, by the way. Lovely presentation." She leaned forward slightly. "But we're gonna go ahead and pass." She took another sip. The video ended. Earth's entire network flickered, then recovered. On the Vornikar's bridge, technicians scrambled to trace the source. "She bypassed our signal lock," one of them said, blinking at his console. "She didn't hijack the frequency. She invited herself in." Commander Zorai narrowed his eyes. "Was that Earth's formal leadership?" "No, sir," another replied. "She appears to be a retired schoolteacher from Pennsylvania." Silence fell across the bridge. Then came the second wave, across Earth. Resistance didn't come in the form of missiles or warships. It came in digital chaos. Satellites shifted their telemetry signatures. Alien ships found their targeting systems overwhelmed by random streaming data music, old sitcoms. Sports broadcasts kept videos. One cruiser's navigation system locked onto a loop file labeled "How to Parallel Parking for Steps" and began circling the Indian Ocean. Another was grounded in Brazil when its whole sensors were tricked into reading atmospheric pressure at sea level, causing it to land directly into a flooded mangrove swamp. It was later photographed by dozens of tourists and added to Google Maps as abandoned space taco. Meanwhile, Earth's governments weren't entirely unprepared. Though lacking the fleet strength of the K-Thorn, humanity had long been suspicious of alien attention. Dozens of contingency plans, once shelved as conspiracy theory or overpreparedness, were dusted off and quietly activated. Tech companies began coordinating through encrypted back channels. Amateur radio operators around the world joined forces. With military comms teams, underground hacker collectives worked through the night, finding cracks in the alien encryption and mapping their orbital positions. The alien fleet, once perfectly synchronized, began experiencing glitches, delays, and resource confusion. By day 4, several council observers monitoring the invasion from neutral ships began to notice the strange pattern unfolding. Earth hadn't fired a single weapon. It hadn't launched a single craft, but it was already pushing back. Commander Zorai stood at the viewing platform aboard the Vornikar, watching the blue planet below. This was supposed to be easy, he said quietly. His second in command, a younger officer, approached carefully. "Should we proceed with ground deployment?" Zorai didn't answer at first. Finally, he said, "Yes, but begin with remote scouts. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with." He looked again at the planet, at its swirling clouds, its shifting continents. "They refused our demand with a coffee mug," he muttered. "I don't know whether to laugh or worry." The first ground squads landed quietly. The K-Thorn chose locations based on satellite readings and population density strategic points. Where resistance seemed unlikely, the Australian outback, a rural area in North America, and a quiet farming town in Eastern Europe. These were meant to be test deployments, peaceful, fast, and easy to control. But no plan survives contact with Earth. The squad that landed in the Australian desert was never heard from again. The final message from the transport drone was a short audio clip of static, followed by shouting, and then what sounded distinctly like laughter and an animal growl none of their translators could identify. Later, a local park ranger radioed, "In a sighting of some weird armored fellas running from an emu." "No, I'm serious. An emu." Back on the Vornikar, Commander Zorai frowned at the silence. "Did they not have drones for support?" "They did, sir," replied his officer. "But they all deactivated after receiving something called a firmware update from an Earth-based signal." Zorai blinked. "What does that mean?" "We don't know yet." In the American Midwest, another squad landed near a cornfield outside a quiet town, expecting an empty landscape. The K-Thorn troops stepped cautiously into rows of towering green stalks. Then the noise began. Fireworks, loud country music, and the roar of a giant farm combine engine broke the calm. The soldiers scrambled to recalibrate their hearing filters, just as the machine burst through the cornfield, flanked by a dozen pickup trucks with searchlights mounted on their roofs. Shouts echoed through the dust and smoke. "Hey, you can't park there. Get off our land. Turn down that flashlight. It's harvest season." Panicking, The squad retreated to their shuttle, only to find its access panel duct taped shut with a note, "Nice ship. We borrowed a few parts. Thanks," in a small Eastern European village. A third landing team entered what appeared to be an empty town square. They approached cautiously, their scanners reading minimal energy output. Then, as they began to investigate, a group of elderly locals emerged from behind buildings holding wooden tools and shouting in a language the translator struggled to parse. The squad leader tried to issue calming commands. One of the locals replied by hitting his translator device. With a ladle, the soldiers retreated in a line, stepping into a trap made of frozen mud and garden hoses. One fell. The others were surrounded. They were not harmed, but they were fed. Later reports showed they were seated at a long table and served soup, while stern grandmothers lectured them on manners and respect. The K-Tharn called for emergency retrieval. On board the Vorna car, Zorai stared at the reports. "We sent 3 squads with advanced recon tools, plasma armor, and neural mapping systems. They were stopped by farmers, senior citizens, and improvised machines." His second-in-command nodded. "Correct, Commander." He paused, then added, "We also lost contact with one dropship after it landed near a place called Florida. The last message it sent was, 'There are people wrestling a large reptile on the road. Request clarification.'" Then the feed cut out. Zorai turned slowly. "What kind of reptile?" "We're still researching. Apparently, it's considered normal behavior in that region." The commander was silent for a long time. Outside, the ship, Earth turned slowly beneath the stars. It was a beautiful world, seemingly peaceful and green, but looks, he realized, could be deceiving. "I want full review of cultural data," he ordered. "Every file, every image, every social report, and find out what a combine harvester is." The second-in-command nodded and hurried off. Zorai stepped to the viewport and exhaled. Earth hadn't fired a single shot, but already, morale across the invasion fleet was wavering. Whatever humans were, they weren't easy to predict. And more than that, they didn't seem afraid. Commander Zorai had never seen an occupation spiral this quickly without a single shot being fired. By the end of the first week, the fleet's morale reports were troubling. Not because of resistance in the traditional sense, but because the ground teams couldn't figure out if Earth was fighting back or just being Earth. He reviewed a field report from Unit 12, stationed near the outskirts of a coastal U.S. city. Hostiles encountered in construction zone. It read, "Personnel ambushed by high-velocity paintballs and targeted by industrial-grade leaf blowers. Retreat required after unit commander tripped over a cement mixer." Attached was a video, a group of humans in hard hats cheering as a K-Tharn trooper slipped and fell into a portable toilet. It would have been funny if it weren't one of 6 similar reports that morning. In the United Kingdom, a fleet drone was forced to land after a group of engineers used long-range laser pointers and mirrors to create false sensor readings, leading the drone to think it had reached low orbit when it was actually descending into a sheep pasture. The drone was later found turned upside down and being used as a shelter by the local animals. Meanwhile, in South Korea, a trio of university students hacked into a K-Tharn aerial scanner using a modified video game console. Instead of disabling it, they reprogrammed it to play music and dance above their school's roof, flashing messages like, "Nice try, aliens." Earth's military still hadn't officially engaged, but across the planet, civilians were becoming the resistance not through force, but through creativity, cooperation, and sheer refusal to take anything lying down. In a small French town, elderly citizens used ancient radio equipment to jam K-Tharn communications with old jazz recordings and confused French recipes. In Nairobi, a group of teenage coders hijacked a surveillance drone and used it to livestream a fundraiser for local schools. It raised thousands from alien viewers. Commander Zorai rubbed his eyes as he watched another broadcast, this one from a neighborhood in South America, where firefighters had retrofitted their trucks with electromagnetic coils to temporarily disable ground transports. The footage showed a K-Tharn patrol frozen in confusion as hoses, sirens, and laughter overwhelmed them from all directions. "This is not war," he muttered. "This is chaos, strategic chaos." One of the science officers cleared their throat. "Sir, we've analyzed human communication networks. Their response patterns suggest decentralized cooperation. It's not coordinated from a central command. It is frighteningly effective. In other words, they don't need orders to fight." Zorai said, "No, Commander, The officer replied. They need only a reason. Back on Earth, the humans were beginning to share tactics. Social media turned into a global hub of alien disruption tips. People uploaded how-to guides, diagrams, drone blueprints, even makeshift camouflage tutorials using household items. One post read, "How I confused an alien surveillance team using garden gnomes, reflective vests, and a Roomba." The comment section was full of praise, jokes, and improvements. Zorai stared at the blinking data stream on the main display. The Katharans still had technological superiority, but it wasn't mattering. The humans were turning the invasion into a puzzle and they were enjoying it. He tapped into the fleet's internal message system. "All commanders," he said, "update protocols. Prepare for non-traditional resistance. Rely less on standard suppression models." He hesitated, then added, "and double-check anything labeled as a meme. That word keeps showing up in threat analysis. I want to know what it means." As the command echoed across the fleet, a new alert came through. One of the orbital surveillance ships had been compromised. The culprit, a teenager in New Zealand who had linked his home telescope to a weather balloon, feeding it AI-generated satellite data from old science fiction movies. The ship had turned itself upside down trying to chase a non-existent fleet. Earth was adapting faster than expected. And Zorai realized Earth was also learning. The Hall of Resonance had never felt so quiet. A full assembly had been called, something usually reserved for interstellar emergencies or treaty collapses. Delegates from over 60 member species now hovered in tense silence, watching the playback. On the central holo screen, it showed a Katharan skirmish walker attempting to land in a suburban area of Earth. As the walker descended, it was hit by a barrage of glowing orbs. "They threw soap balloons," murmured a delegate from the Realty. The footage continued. A group of Earth children had coordinated the ambush, using backpacks full of homemade dive bombs and water hoses rigged with pressure valves. The walker stumbled, sensors blinded. A garage door opened and an old, modified delivery drone launched, playing music at full volume and carrying a handwritten banner, "No solicitors." The chamber rippled with quiet disbelief. Council Chair Arbiter Lux addressed the room. "Reports indicate Earth has yet to deploy official military force. Yet in less than 8 planetary days, the occupying fleet has sustained 57 tactical withdrawals, 17 equipment losses, and 24 drone repurposings." A screen lit with still images. One showed a Katharan hoverbike being used to deliver pizza. Another had a repainted patrol bot dancing in a street parade. A third showed alien officers locked inside a storage unit labeled garage sale. "Do not open until Saturday." Ambassador Talion of the Asari shifted uncomfortably. "Has the fleet requested reinforcements?" "No," said the Arbiter. "They've requested instructions. Specifically, how to negotiate surrender without appearing to surrender." Gasps scattered through the chamber. The Katharan delegation said nothing. Hrel, who had originally proposed the operation, sat frozen, his usual arrogance nowhere in sight. Ambassador Vetra of the Northerly Confederation leaned forward. "This confirms what I warned. Earth is not merely resilient, it is creatively ungovernable. They resist, not through confrontation, but through absurdity, through cooperation, through mischief." Ambassador Lorik of the Trelawney added, "They weaponize inconvenience." Vetra nodded. "An embarrassment." A delegate from the Zelshan, a race of energy-based life forms, asked, "But surely, this is a temporary disruption. Their civilization lacks unified direction. That is the problem," Vetra replied. "There is no central command. They don't need orders. They act because they want to, and they share their tactics faster than we can analyze them." The Arbiter raised a hand, quieting the debate. "There's one more transmission you must see," it said. It came from a hacked council relay, sent directly to us, from Earth. The lights dimmed. A new recording played. A human in casual clothing sat in front of a chalkboard. Drawn behind them was a crude diagram of an alien ship stuck in a tree. "Hi, again," the human said cheerfully. "We noticed you're having trouble. Your guys keep slipping on ice, getting caught in local holidays, or being offered food by strangers." The human smiled. "We're not mad. Honestly, it's kind of flattering. But here's the thing, this planet runs on community, caffeine, and stubbornness. You might take our orbit, but if you knock on our door, you better be ready to make small talk and try the casserole." They leaned closer. "So maybe, just maybe, we stop pretending this is a one-sided thing. Come down for dinner. Bring a chair. We'll even let you pick the music. The screen flickered off. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Talion said quietly, "They're inviting us to a meal." After turning our fleet into the punchline of a planetary sitcom, Harel stood suddenly. "This isn't a joke. This is humiliation." "No," said Vetra gently. "This is humanity. This is what they do. When you underestimate them." The Arbiter let the silence stretch, then spoke with calm finality. "The motion to reconsider Earth's invasion status is now open for discussion, and across the galaxy. For the first time in ages, the Council began to question whether it was Earth that needed guidance or if the Council itself had misjudged everything. By the 10th day of the invasion, Earth had stopped panicking. Now it was planning. What began as scattered, spontaneous responses was quickly evolving into something more focused. Hackers were coordinating with engineers, students were sending schematics to local makerspaces, retired military officers teamed up with teenagers on message boards to optimize drone jamming techniques using kitchen appliances, and then someone had an idea. A live stream. Not just any stream, a global broadcast. A show. They called it Operation Welcome Mat. It began as a single feed out of Iceland, where an amateur filmmaker turned an empty barn into a studio. He invited people from around the world to send in their alien encounters. Within 48 hours, the stream had over 300 million viewers. Every human with a story, a plan, or a prank wanted in. The format was simple: live interviews, highlight reels, tactical breakdowns, and humor. A scientist from Tokyo demonstrated how she convinced a hovering surveillance orb that her pet bird was a high-level bioweapon, causing it to flee and report false data. A farmer in Canada explained how he painted cow patterns on his barn roof to confuse thermal imaging. An old woman in Italy showed how she reprogrammed a drone using a universal TV remote and a lot of patience. People weren't just watching. They were joining. In Brazil, flash mobs began appearing near alien patrols, dancing to local music with hand-painted signs reading, "Smile for the Council." In Poland, a team of artists created enormous crop murals, not as distress signals, but as sarcastic reviews of the alien landing patterns. One said, in 10-foot letters, "Nice try. Wrong planet." And then came the map, an open-source project uploaded by a group of data analysts in Mumbai. The map became a living, real-time strategy hub. It tracked alien movement, public responses, and the most effective tricks used in each region. The whole world started contributing: prank ratings, strategy guides, even repair tips for confused alien drones. Commander Zorai watched the stream with a strange, growing tension. "They've gamified us," he said aloud, as he stared at a segment titled "Top 5 Invasion Fails, This Week's Highlights." In one clip, a K-Tharn scout tried to chase down what appeared to be a mobile weapon, only to discover it was a toddler's remote control toy with a Wi-Fi amplifier strapped on. In another, a patrol bot had been painted entirely pink and was now being used to deliver bubble tea in a city center. Zorai turned to his officers. "They're not scared. They're entertained. We're the entertainment." His second-in-command didn't disagree. "Our systems are still being spoofed. 32% of sensor readings are false. We've tracked fleets that don't exist. One of our orbitals tried to flee from a projected shadow," another officer added grimly. "One of our own cruisers accidentally targeted its reflection on a human skyscraper. The building was glass and still. Not a single missile had been fired from Earth. Not one." They weren't fighting in the traditional sense. Humanity had weaponized their culture, their mischief, their endless flood of creativity. They had unified not around leaders, but around ideas, around fun, around defiance, around each other. Earth had become a stage, and the galaxy was watching. Streams from Operation Welcome Mat were being picked up by other species. Translations appeared, reactions followed. Some laughed, others were horrified. But all were watching. In a council-affiliated observatory on the moons of Stellar, a group of young scholars had begun cataloging Earth's actions. One of them, a quiet student of galactic civilizations, wrote a single line in his notes: "They resist not to win, but because giving up is simply not who they are." Back on Earth, a new banner appeared during a live broadcast. It read, "Dear invaders, you started this. We're just hosting now, and somewhere in orbit." Commander Zorai realized this invasion had stopped being a mission. Had become a lesson. Commander Zorai stood alone on the observation deck of the Vornikar, arms folded behind his back as Earth spun serenely below. The planet looked peaceful, serene even, as if it weren't turning the might of a Catharn invasion fleet into a joke played for the whole galaxy, but the illusion of control was cracking. Supply lines were disorganized. Troops were refusing ground deployments. Several junior officers had filed formal requests for reassignment to asteroid monitoring duty. Asteroids, claiming it was less stressful. The worst part, they weren't wrong. Reports from the ground now arrived with headers like cultural confusion level, extreme, and encountered hostile hospitality, fed twice, escaped with recipes. One squad had even filed a complaint that they had been laughed out of a pet store by a talking bird. Zorai's comms console blinked. He tapped it. A message from the outer patrol line came through. Unidentified ships entering local space. No signs of aggression. Not council tagged. Possible observers? Zorai narrowed his eyes. Observers? He didn't have to wait long. Within the hour, 6 small vessels entered high orbit. Ships bearing no formal military insignia, but the unmistakable shimmer of advanced tech. Their hulls bore markings from various council species, civilian crafts, independent, curious, unofficial. The lead ship hailed the Vornikar. A calm voice came through. "This is Scholar Rettel of the Trelawney Archives. We are here to witness, too." "Witness what?" Zorai asked, though he already knew the answer. "Humanity." More followed. A historian from the Solarian Clade, a behaviorist from the Venkari Swarm, even a cultural diplomat from the elusive Zevra. A species known more for their silence than any overt interest in outsiders. They had all come for the same reason. Earth was doing the unthinkable, and others wanted to see how within days. Permission was requested, though Zorai suspected it would have happened regardless. For several observer delegates to descend to the surface, they were met not with hostility, but hospitality, tea in England, street food in Thailand, a traditional welcome dance in New Zealand that involved costumes, fire, and a carefully choreographed chase scene with someone dressed as a terrified alien. The observers were overwhelmed, but not frightened, fascinated. Scholar Rettel sent back a short report to his archive. No species has ever weaponized humor so effectively. Their unity is not a command, but of intent. Their strength lies not in firepower, but in collective unpredictability. They resist by living loudly. Meanwhile, back on the Vornikar, discontent began to bubble. Troops talked quietly in mess halls. Officers avoided eye contact. Some even tuned into the human live streams, not to monitor tactics, but to laugh, to relate, to cheer when a patrol. Ba was outwitted by a child with a slingshot and a drone shaped like a duck. It wasn't just embarrassing anymore. It was contagious. Zorai called an emergency assembly aboard the flagship. "We are being observed, not by humans, but by our own kind, our council peers. They're watching this unfold, and they are not seeing dominance. They are seeing doubt." An aide handed him the latest report. He scanned it, jaw tightening. One Catharn pilot had voluntarily landed and asked to speak with a human schoolteacher, just to understand how they think. Another officer had defected entirely, choosing to remain in Brazil, where he'd been adopted by a local community who now referred to him as Cousin Carr. Zorai exhaled, long and slow. "If this continues, our occupation fleet will become a student delegation." And then, the final message arrived, not from Earth, not from a resistance leader, but from the Galactic Council itself. "Cease forward action. Enter observation status. Negotiations with planetary representatives are to be encouraged. Immediate compliance required." Zorai stared at the words. The Council wasn't ending the invasion. Earth had ended it for them. And now, the galaxy was watching Earth, not with fear, but with respect. The Grand Hall was unlike anything the human delegates had ever seen, spanning hundreds of meters. Its crystalline walls shimmered softly with light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with distant stars. Alien representatives filled the room, some towering, some ethereal, others whose very forms defied easy description. The Galactic Council had convened for a historic purpose, but the true surprise was not the room or the spectacle. It was the humans themselves, led by Dr. Maya El Hashim, a cultural anthropologist from Earth. The delegation stood tall, calm, and confident. They carried no weapons, no threats. Instead, they carried the stories of a planet that refused to be conquered, not by force, but by spirit. The Council Chair Arbiter Lux opened the session. "Delegates," Lux began, Voice resonant yet warm, we gather not to celebrate conquest, but to acknowledge a new chapter. Earth has shown us a truth long forgotten, that strength lies not only in power, but in unity, creativity, and resilience. Maya stepped forward, her voice steady. When your fleet first arrived, Earth was unprepared, but what you met was not weakness. It was a civilization forged by adversity, shaped by curiosity, and sustained by connection. She paused, eyes meeting those of alien leaders. We did not resist because we wanted war. We resisted because we wanted to live fully, freely, together, and in doing so, we have much to teach, not about war, but about peace. A ripple passed through the room. Some delegates nodded, others whispered, but all listened. Luck smiled gently. This council recognizes Earth not as a threat, but as a partner. We invite humanity to join the Galactic Assembly. Gasps filled the hall. Maya's smile widened. We accept. From that moment, Earth's story shifted. No longer a distant, unknown planet targeted for conquest, Earth became a beacon, proof that even the smallest, most underestimated species could rewrite the rules. Humanity shared its lessons. How to leverage diversity into strength, how humor could disarm hostility, and how decentralized unity could challenge even the most advanced forces. Council delegates marveled at human creativity, their arts, their music, their willingness to embrace the unknown with open arms and laughter. Meanwhile, back on Earth, celebrations erupted. Streets filled with dancing and song, people of all ages rejoicing not just in survival, but in newfound respect. Commander Zorai, now a liaison between the Katharn fleet and Earth's representatives, watched the festivities from orbit. He felt a quiet pride not in victory, but in understanding. This, he thought, is the future. The Council's stunned reaction had been right. Invading Earth was madness, but that madness had been human, and it had changed everything.